We just decided that we wanted to be done by 4:30, so you'd have a half an hour to deal with your stress. Yes. My name is Niesje Steinkruger. I came to Alaska. I worked in private practice. I worked at the Attorney General's office doing child in need of aid cases. I worked at the Public Defender's office representing kids in child in need of aid cases, kids accused of crimes, and parents. I went back to private practice, and in 1988 I went on the bench as a Superior Court judge here in Fairbanks, which covers all of the interior of Alaska. I was on the bench for 19 years before I retired. But really, I want to talk about something else today. I want to talk about Morningside Hospital for 10 minutes. For the young people in this room that don't know about Morningside Hospital, would you raise your hand if you've ever heard of Morningside Hospital? Yes. Between about 1880 and statehood in 1960, 4,000 to 5,000 Alaskans, we call them the Lost Alaskans, were sent by mental commitments to a hospital in Portland called Morningside Hospital. Many families from the interior lost relatives and never knew what happened to them. Karen Perdue and Robin Renfro got a project started and sucked me in. And I told them I'd give them 3 years, and I ended up giving them 5. These were people who were found real and truly insane, the equivalent of a Title 47 mental commitment in Alaska today. These 4,000 to 5,000 people were sent to Morningside after having trials. They went by, federal marshals took them. They went by dog team, they walked, they went by sled, they went by plane, train, got them to Seattle. They were transported with federal convicts. When I started on this, well, I should say first that we don't know who these people were because the hospital burned down in the late 60s, and there was never a list. Neither state government had a list, federal government didn't have a list, the BIA didn't have a list. There was no way for people to find out whatever happened to their family member. Then Judge Green from Fairbanks and I discovered that every one of the people that went to Morningside went by a court order, because that's the only way that the BIA would pay the daily rate for people to be in Morningside Hospital. And so we started working backwards in the court cases, which are in big, giant books down in Juneau, because they didn't have any copy machines, right? Just, they're written in the books. And we went through each and every one of them looking for names. I think our list is now about 95% accurate. It was fascinating. I believed that this was going to be a railroad, where people were just railroaded to this mental hospital. It was wonderful to see that that wasn't true. Every single person that went had a 6-person jury trial. The jury was required to determine if the person was real and truly insane. So the verdict was not real and truly insane or real and truly insane. Almost all of the cases, even from rural Alaska, the person had a lawyer. They were seen by a doctor. However, you must also consider that this was from 1880 to 1960. America knew very little about mental illness. You may be seen by a doctor, but the doctor couldn't do anything to help you. And like in institutions all over the United States during that time period, many people ended up in mental institutions that were not mentally ill. The youngest patient that I found was 6 weeks old. The oldest was 96. We saw drug abusers, alcoholics, people with epilepsy, Down syndrome, hydrocephalic infants, lots of mental illness, and dementia. And there were many people from rural Alaska villages, as well as gold miners and shopkeepers and people from the canneries. We now have a pretty good list. You can go to www.morningsidehospital.com and you can put in a person's name and look for them. Many people were found not guilty, which I was glad to see. Some people came back to Alaska, but most people died in Portland. They were in the hospital until they died. These Alaskans are buried in 4 cemeteries in Portland, in marked graves and unmarked graves, in some ravines that I have visited. You can look for a family member or a village member by starting off at the website, and then we even have a couple of volunteers who are in Portland who help people look for the graves. There are 2 families in the interior that have found their loved one and brought them back and buried them with the rest of the family in their village. Our goal was to get names and get people's names. I'm not working on the project directly now because I want others to do it, but I do see my role as telling people about it so that they can tell other people and people can find whatever happened to their family member. The mental health lands, the mental health trust we have today came out of this because there was a big political scandal in the 50s. It came out of Oregon and Washington, D.C. about how Alaskans were being treated, and Congress wanted out of the business of Alaska's insane people, and that's when they gave land to Alaska to use to take care of its own mentally ill people. In the 60s, people came back to Alaska, many to Valdez, and then after API was built to API. I visited 2 folks that were at Denali Center that had spent many, many years at Morningside Hospital before it burned down. However, it's a story that I think is really an important civil rights story for Alaska and about how we take care of our communities. And I would be more than willing to talk to you about coming to your village and talking to kids at your village or community members in your village about what happened, what the details were, and bring pictures from there. The important part for me when I finished the project was to see how little things had changed. That in fact, our treatment of mental illness in Alaska today and our villages and our towns is very little different than it was from 1880 to 1960. Certainly we don't put people with epilepsy in institutions anymore, but our inability to figure out how to help people with mental illness is a problem not only for Alaska, but across the country. We wait until there's a violent felony, or we wait until there's a suicide or an attempt of a suicide. And again, this is not something that the law is going to fix. It's our ongoing conflict between individual freedoms and locking people up against their will, even for brief periods of time. And as a culture, we have not figured out how to address this problem. But I urge you each in your villages to understand that you are not alone in dealing with folks in your village who are mentally ill, and that asking for help is one of the most important things that you can do. That's my Morningside speech. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about judicial stress. Being a judge involves being really quiet a lot of the time and eating your stress. I prefer M&Ms, and other kinds of eating is what I do. But all of us, if you have dealt with any of these cases, find them stressful. There's a concept called secondary traumatic stress, or vicarious traumatic experience. And that's where you view other people's trauma and pain. And it's very hard to do that without taking some of it inside of you and not feeling some of it. One of the things that's important is to try and build your own personal resilience, because nobody's going to do it for you. Lawyers, clerks, other judges, family members, they don't know how to build that resilience for you. But if you're going to be in this for the long term, and 19 years was a long time, you have to figure out how to build your own resilience. That doesn't mean that you don't cry. That doesn't mean that you don't get angry. That doesn't mean that you don't get tired. But you figure out how to bounce back from that. You have to be able to adapt and change to life's adverse events. It's hard to remember that the people that are in front of you don't represent everybody. That I remember going once to Fort Wainwright to an event and thinking, wow, these people are being awfully nice to their children. And then realizing that the only soldiers I saw were those that were not nice to their children, that hurt their children. You have to learn that things are always changing and figure out how to accept change. No matter how often they work on the computer system, it's always going to break down. No often how much they say they're going to get a newer and better one, you're the one that has to learn the newer and better one. There's nothing you can do about that. You have to accept that this constant change is going to be a part of your professional life. You talk to yourself internally about perfection. People have talked here about getting the right answer when you're a judge. There is no perfection. If there was a right answer and it was perfect, people would figure this out without us. They bring to us the problems that they cannot resolve. And in dealing with humans, we see lots of flaws. We have to make our best effort to be patient and to listen. My own personal flaw is sarcasm. It took all of my self-control on the bench to not occasionally say, now let me see if I got this straight. And sometimes I'm sure there are tape recordings with those words on it. An example is, so often a woman in a divorce would say, Judge, you've just got to get him to do X. And I'd think, honey, if you couldn't get him to do X, I'm not going to get him to do X. He shouldn't take the kids for fast food. I want you to have an order that he has to feed them healthy meals when they're with him. I'm like, not going to happen. They're going to eat junk food when they're with him. So people's expectations of what you can do often are quite unrealistic. It helps to see ourselves as hardy people. We are resilient and we are hardy. We are not victims. We don't blame others for whatever today has brought us. And we don't gripe. We joke a lot. We shake our heads and grin, but we don't gripe. And we need to have realistic expectations. When you're dealing with child protection and child neglect, this child is unlikely to grow up in a really great home. This child is going to grow up in an adequate home. When you're dealing with domestic violence, it's not likely that the perpetrator of the domestic violence is going to turn into a compassionate, insightful person. You aim for the domestic violence offender to stop hitting people. And sometimes we have compassion fatigue. We feel other people's experiences. We understand their thoughts, and we want to fix it. Particularly if you're women, you want to fix it. We want to fix it. We listen to the stories of others. We see pictures sometimes that stay in our brains for a very long time. And we see events that happen. And every so often, people come along, almost every day, and they've taken all the bad crap that's going on, and they've put it in a box, and they have put gift paper around it in a bow, and they hand it to you and want you to fix it. And we can't do that. They teach doctors this in medical school. They teach doctors about problems that come in, people that have difficulties that come in, and that they can't fix it. There's a limited amount of things they can do. They do not teach judges that, but it's the truth. There is a limited amount that you can do. The strain takes its toll and people burn out. One of the things you may or may not know is almost all judges have significant physical problems. And that's a lot of internal stress most of the time. Their immune system breaks down. They get colds, they get the flu. When they travel, they pick up every germ on the plane. They cough through court endlessly. Their backs and legs are a constant problem because of the sitting for long periods of time. They have significant back problems. They suffer from depression and anxiety. Anxiety about the, am I making you guys think you're gonna quit? Dang it. Yeah. Well, I just, I guess I just want to say it's okay. This is what happens. Depression and anxiety. Because you want to fix everything. We tend to be helpers. And so we want to fix stuff. And we have anxiety about all the work there is to do, and if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? That's the kind of people we are. It's important when you have those physical symptoms to be careful about medications, particularly pain medications. Judges should not be sitting if they're taking pain medications that affect what they do. If it says on the little bottle you shouldn't drive, you probably shouldn't be deciding other people's lives. Coping plans. You have to put together a coping plan. And no matter, and this is something throughout your career that you keep adding to all the time. You need to sleep. If you're not sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night, you're not going to be able to do the job. You need sleep. You can have a short sleep deficit when you're traveling, but you gotta sleep. That's how your brain is going to allow you to do this work. You need to eat healthy food. Every courthouse I know is one-stop shopping for salty and sweet snacks. The stress is such that you just eat junk food all the time, but you need to eat healthy food. You need to have little to no alcohol. That first drink at the end of the day can feel pretty good, but it's a depressive. It's a depressive, and it will, in very short time, affect your ability to see the world accurately and to be patient with people. You need to work with a team. Sometimes a team is just one other person. For most of us, it is just one other person, where you can go in and shut the door and say, you are not blankety blank going to believe this. A place where you can go and dump and things don't get repeated. You need to be aware of your own trauma history. So when a trauma or an experience of a child comes before you, you recognize that you know what this is, but it doesn't make you do anything different. You need to stop when you are absolutely saturated. And lawyers are just incredibly good at getting you to go on. Because you sort of have this, I'm tough, I can go all day, I can go through dinner. You want to go through lunch? We'll take a 15-minute break about how tough you are. And lawyers lie, oh my gosh, they lie. I never met a lawyer that didn't say, Judge, this will just take 5 minutes. Bull roar. It will not just take 5 minutes, it'll take 5 hours. You know, and part of that is they're deceiving themselves. They don't want to be doing this either. But nothing takes 5 minutes. And so it's important to remember that you hold the power to stop. If you have been sitting there for 4 hours or 3 hours without a break, you call the shot and you take a break. If it is 6 o'clock or 4 o'clock and you need to be home and you are saturated, you can't take in anymore, you tell them to come back tomorrow. And they will whine. Everybody will whine. Oh, Judge, I just have a little bit more. I think we can finish this up. That means they can finish it up and then you can start your work. Oh, Judge, I think this is going to be pretty quick for you to rule on. I think not. You're the only one that can protect yourself and say, it's 4 o'clock, I'm saturated, we will start tomorrow morning at 9 or whatever. You have the control to take care of yourself. For me, I could not read books or watch television shows that involved child trauma, domestic violence, family dysfunction, criminal cases, pretty much everything that's on TV. Because it was just more of the same and it was not entertaining. And it was not rejuvenating to me in any way. So pay attention to what you're watching and what you're reading. Laughter is the best thing that you can give yourself. And finally, I guess it took me many, many years to figure out that good enough is good enough. We seek perfection. We work hard trying to get it all right. We want to make sure we've nailed down every little piece, but good enough. You're never going to have all of the information. At the end of every case, you're going to be left wondering, I wonder about this, I wonder about that. What happened when they did this? What happened when they did that? And you're never going to know. You just have to make a decision on the information that you have. If you have spirituality, you rely upon it. It's an important piece. And you have to be flexible. If you are rigid, this system beats you up. You have to be flexible. People often told me that you had to have a thick skin to do this work. I don't have a thick skin. Every comment hurt my feelings, made me feel inadequate, and I never developed a thick skin. So it didn't work for me. But to the extent you can let not just those comments roll around in your head, and try and remember the good comments, even if you have to write them down and put them in a drawer in your desk. So you pull them out. You try and give yourself positive reinforcement. Certainly the newspaper or what other people say is usually inaccurate. All you can say to yourself when you hear those things and you see those things is, I was there, that person was not there. I know what happened there, they don't know what happened there, and then you have to let it go because you were the one that was there. And finally, you ask for help. You call Lisa, you call me, you can find me. You find people because going over the edge is not pretty. You find people and we will help you. It's been my pleasure to be here today. Dave's going to pick up.